Hey guys, so I hate to break this to you, but you're doing willpower wrong. And that's really frustrating because you probably want to change your life in some significant way, whether that's deepening your relationships or changing your financial health. And in order to do that, you need to build some habits that are going to empower you or destroy some habits that are getting in the way. And willpower is an essential ingredient in that whole process. The issue is that the way you're looking at willpower is hurting your ability to be motivated and hurting your ability to show up consistently. So what I want to do is I want to paint you a picture of why willpower is so important. I want to show you some obstacles that you're probably running into and some strategies that nobody's talking about that's actually going to help you build willpower and make it easier for future habit development. So first and foremost, why is willpower so important? I'm going to make a bold claim based on a lot of research. Willpower outpredicts IQ by a factor of 2. Just going to say it again so it sinks in. Willpower outpredicts IQ by a factor of 2. Now, why is that? First and foremost, willpower is your ability to delay gratification towards a better future goal. And so most people lack the ability to delay that gratification so they can reap the rewards. Well, when you take a look at the research, what we find is that people who have higher levels of willpower or self-discipline actually have lower BMIs, they have more financial income, they do better on standardized testing, and they self-score their relationships as being deeper and more connected, as compared to just looking at people's IQ alone. Now, this is mind-blowing because most of us believe that the smarter you are, the better your freaking life should be. And the evidence and the research is to the contrary. Willpower outpredicts all these measures of success by a factor of 2, meaning that if you have more willpower, you're more likely to be successful. The beautiful thing about this is that willpower is a learnable skill and it can grow. Okay, so it's critical that we learn the underworkings of how this whole process works. The second thing that makes willpower so important is, like I just said, it is a teachable skill and you can grow it. Meaning that willpower is not as finite as we thought it was. Most people think you had this vat of willpower, and once it got drained throughout the day or week, it was gone. But what we know is that's only true if you're using willpower as the main source of delaying gratification. If willpower is your primary tool, it will deplete over time. But what we know from researcher Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset, your willpower is actually infinite when you start seeing your ability to do hard things as something that you can do. So if you see willpower as being something that you can grow, not something that's difficult, you actually grow your ability to use willpower. So willpower is amazing because it's a learnable tool. It's something that can grow, and the only difference here is the way you look at willpower. So if I can get you sold on the fact that your willpower is more important than your IQ, it's a learnable skill that can grow, and actually the way that you see willpower determines how much of it you have. That's going to change your life. And so if I have you bought in here, let me talk a little bit about some of the obstacles you're probably facing in order to build willpower. So the biggest mistake I see people make is that they look at all these hyper-disciplined people and they must think, oh, the most disciplined people in the world have the most willpower. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. What you don't know about the most disciplined people is that they try to use willpower as little as possible. Now, how could that possibly be? Well, two important factors. One, they go on offense, not defense. And 2, they strike when the iron is cold, not when the iron is hot. What do I mean by that? Most people think that when I'm in a tough situation, I use willpower and that gets me out of it. It's really hard to be at a bar and then decide you're not going to drink. It's really difficult to have Ben & Jerry's in the fridge and decide you're not going to eat ice cream. The most disciplined people in the world go on offense, meaning they use the willpower that they have to create habits that are like little algorithms that run on autopilot. The best way to avoid having to make 1,000 other decisions is making one very critical decision that avoids you needing to make 100 decisions down the future. Okay? So if we can use our limited willpower to create habits that then run on autopilot and avoid us being in situations where we need to even rely on willpower at all, the more we can grow our willpower and the better our lives are going to get. So the most primary obstacle I see is stop playing defense. Start going on offense and using some of the tools that you have available to you to start building habits so that you don't even need to be in the face of willpower. One of the best quotes I read in a book called Tiny Habits is buy your willpower at the grocery store. How can I go on offense in my life? And we'll talk about some strategies. How can we go on offense in order to put myself in a situation where I no longer need to rely on willpower? Going on offense is a really, really important mental framework that completely changed my life, because I thought I was at the whim of the situations of my life, when in reality I can control my environment and shape it in a way that made it less likely for me to need willpower, so that I could use my willpower to my advantage and grow it in ways by building habits. The second thing you need to understand, or the second obstacle I see people facing, is they act when the iron is hot, not cold. What does that mean? Well, we know that in order to delay gratification, we need to avoid impulses. Most of us are using our emotional brain to make decisions in the heat of the moment. For example, oh, I see that thing that I want, I'm just going to buy it, and I spend. Or, oh, that cookie looks really good, and my emotional brain takes over, and I just eat it. The issue is that most people are striking when the iron is hot, meaning they're really emotionally reactive, and they're not thinking clearly, because we know that our emotional brain controls about 90% of the things we do, and our logical brain is like that lucky guy that we get to tap into 10% of the time. The goal is to switch to using your rational brain to stop making emotional decisions. And the way I think about it is you have a stimulus and you have a response. And most people, when you're acting reactively, have a gap that's maybe like a nanometer, a millimeter wide. In order to start making more empowered decisions, and in order to start delaying gratification and getting out of the heat of the moment, we need to widen that gap between stimulus and response, create space between what happens to us and how we decide to react, so we can make more empowered decisions. And the best way we can do that is striking while the iron is cold, when we're more regulated, when we're less reactive, less emotional, and more rationally online. And we're going to talk about some strategies to do that, but the two biggest things I need you to understand is, first and foremost, that people with the most discipline don't rely on willpower. They use the limited willpower they have to create habits that run on autopilot, so they can avoid being in the heat of the moment and actually needing willpower in the first place. The second thing you need to understand is that in order to grow your willpower, you need to learn to regulate yourself in a way that limits the amount of emotional decision making you're doing and increases the amount of rational decision making that you're doing by striking when the iron is cold, not hot. If you understand those two concepts, it'll drastically change the way you perceive your self-control, your self-discipline, and increase the amount of motivation and consistency you have towards a future goal. So we talked about obstacles, we talked about why willpower is so important. Now let's talk about some very time-tested and specific strategies. I'm going to make this as simple as possible. Two things that you need to know. First and foremost, you need to understand the power of implementation intentions. What are implementation intentions? It's the ability to decide, if X happens, then I will do Y. For example, if I have a cup of coffee in the morning, then I will meditate. If I have 15 minutes before work, then I will do 10 push-ups. If my partner asks me to do something and it takes less than 2 minutes, then I will do it. Implementation intentions are a really powerful way to build this habit of if-then statements that allow you to start creating these little micro habits that, when certain circumstances arise, you start to program these specific actions into your life, right? If I'm at the grocery store, then I will not buy ice cream, right? The whole goal of implementation intentions is that it sets up an offensive front so that you're understanding what you're going to do and when you're going to do it when certain circumstances arise. Instead of waiting to be in the moment where you need to make a decision, you have these pre-concluded decisions that you've already committed to, what's also called pre-commitments, so that when you're in the heat of the battle, or when you're in the face of needing to use willpower, you already have a decision pathway that's mapped out. Another great way I like thinking about this is bright lines. If you're a lawyer, you understand this, but bright lines are very specific things in contracts that make things black or white. For me, those bright lines are not using my phone past 9 o'clock. My bright lines are not drinking when I'm out, right? So you have very specific pre-commitments or bright lines that you can use if-then statements for, that help you start going on the offense instead of playing defense. And what you're doing is you're just thinking about situations that might arise in the future and creating conclusive patterns or habits that you'll run in order to avoid being in the situation in the first place. So if you can master if-then statements and have some bright lines or some pre-commitments that you're already solidified on, you're forecasting the future, it'll make it a lot easier for you to avoid those things in the future. Remember, Remember, 99% is much harder than 100%. If you're all in committed, it makes it very easy to not do something than the grayness of, well, I usually only ever do this, or I don't normally do things like this. Commit 100%, not 99%, and it'll find that it's a lot easier to make those decisions. The second thing I want to help you understand is how do we switch from the emotional brain to the rational brain? How do we expand that gap between stimulus and response so we have more room to make empowered decision? And the best thing that I can help you understand is the process of breathe, plan, and then act. So the fastest way to gain regulation over your nervous system or your emotional mind is, again, striking when the iron's cold. And the fastest way to switch from a hot brain to a cool brain is by taking a moment to pause and breathe. Right? So the number one strategy I recommend to people is when you're heat of the moment, give yourself 3 seconds to take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then make a plan about how you want to move forward, right? If you're about to have that donut, the immediate thing I want you to switch into is how can I take a breath? And then make a decision about if eating that donut moves me closer towards my goals or farther away. Again, I don't want to demonize the donut, but what I want you to do is empower yourself to decide if your actions align with your goals, okay? And then once you have that a moment to create a plan and decide, then you can act on it. Okay. Again, here, the whole goal is to switch from a reactive brain to a proactive brain. It's putting ourselves on the offense, not the defense. And the way we create that space is literally giving ourselves the space via breathing so that you can help have a more empowered response, regulate yourself a little bit more, and be in a more cool state versus a hot state. Okay. So if you understand just these core concepts about willpower, it will drastically change your life. First and foremost, willpower outpredicts IQ by a factor of 2. It is also the thing that is growable and teachable so that you can have more of it in the future, as long as you look at it as a skill that you can grow and actually get more of. The second thing you need to understand is the biggest obstacles to avoid. Stop playing defense and start playing offense, and strike when the iron is cold, not when the iron is hot and you're reactive. And the two best strategies you can implement to growing your willpower are if-then statements, so you can go on the offense, not the defense, and using the breathe, plan, and act method in order to help you increase the gap between stimulus and response and really help you create more empowered decisions towards your goals. I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.